Hi, so Richard Delaney again. I want to run through how to set up the Arizona Vortex Tripod when we're near the edge of the cliff. The first thing I've done is I've selected the operational line, and from that I've come back to an anchor focal point that I want to establish. I like working with 50 meters of power cord, which is what I've got here flaked on the ground. And I'll start with a figure of 8 on the end of the strand, take that to an anchor, bring it back to this point here, and I want to put a complete round turn around that carabiner before I tie that off with 2 half hitches. There's 1 and there's 2. Now I'm going to keep using that same length of cord. I'm going to isolate a new section, so put a new figure of 8 on a bite there. Keep that nice and dressed. Clip that into that same anchor. And now with this end, I'm going to take that up to the anchor that's right at the back of my system. So this is the strand. I've just walked up to my rear anchor. I'll take appropriate tension on that. Now at this point I want to rough the position of this focal point in. So again, I'll take a complete round turn around that carabiner and then put my 2 half hitches. There's 1, and I'm capturing both strands there, and there's 2. At this point here, if I'm sure of my lengths, I could actually dog those half hitches off into each of the carabiners. And now I want to get my 3rd anchor point. Why have I got 3 anchors? Well, if I'm going to be running my whole system off this single anchor plate, then I want to be sure that the failure of any single anchor is not just going to I want to avoid catastrophic failure for sure. I don't want my load to hit the ground, but I also want to make sure that if one anchor point was to move or let go, that my whole system isn't going to be destabilized as that anchor point moves. So my last one here, again, a complete round turn, 2 half hitches in here. There's 1, and there's the other. And I'm already pretty happy with that. So likewise, I'm going to put that half hitch back into my carabiner. Now there is my anchor system that I'm going to be running my whole system off. So again, I want to have a look at this anchor that I've got set up. I've got one big tree back there that's right in line with my intended load. I've also got these ones either side that provide lateral stability for me and take stretch out of the system. Because I've got 3 points, if I have failure of any one of these, either through my setup or poor choice of anchors, my rigging plate isn't going to move, so my whole system is going to be stable. Now I'm ready to proceed with setting up the rest of my system. Okay, so now I've got the tripod all set up and I've taken it to the edge, but before I've taken it there, I've also got it belayed because I've got it on this static length of power cord here. So I've walked it to the edge to make sure that that's the right length, and I've tensioned that back to my anchor as well. A couple of other points I just want to look at here. When I've attached this rear guide to the head of the tripod, I've made sure that that pin comes in from underneath, because if it had come in from the top, it would be in the way of this carabiner. Now the tripod is really well positioned at the edge, and I don't mind that it's slightly off center, because this gap here, that's going to be the side I'm going to have my ropes operating on. Now the last thing I do once I've got the tripod at the edge here is to make sure that it's hobbled appropriately. I could put a hobble on beforehand. At this venue I've decided that I'm going to set the hobble up now. Of course I'm using that same anchor for my safety as I'm near the edge of the cliff as well. The hobble, there's a whole bunch of different options, whether you're using a piece of cord or ratchet straps provided by one of the tripod manufacturers, that's fine. But one of the things that I do really like if I'm using cord, so I've got a figure of 8 on a bite here and I've got a longer bite than I would normally have, is I'm going to start by passing that through one of these holes on the bottom of this foot. And then I'm just going to bring it over and lock it onto that foot. I've gone through the bottom hole. Now I'm going to make my way with that single piece of cord, this is 8mm cord, to the other foot. Now at this foot, I don't have to pass all of that cord through. I'm just going to pass a bite through that hole, get appropriate tension back to the back foot, cleat it up through that foot, over that T-piece, back down through the cleat, and then pull tight. Now I've got an individual hobble that's secured between the back foot and this front left foot. Now I'll go and do the same to the foot on the other side here. So again, this goes across the front of my system. I'm going to take a bite and pass it through the low hole. The lower I keep the hobble, the better it is, because it's making sure I haven't got any undue trip hazards. Get that tension across the front so that it's appropriate. Pull that down through around that T-piece and then pull that back through here. So again, I've got an isolated hobble to that front foot. And now I'll walk back to the last foot. Now this is the time I'm going to go through the top of those two holes on the foot. So I'm going to come around, get appropriate tension on there, across to the other T, cleat it back through and then pull tension on. Then the final thing I can do with the rest of this cord, and it'll just put a little bit more tension in, is I'm just going to take a few half hitches with a bite, just to really secure that end off. 2 half hitches is enough. I could just put it over a pin or something. And lastly, I just want to get all of this excess cord out of the way, stacked in at that foot there so that it's not a hazard for anyone else. So my final checks, now that I've got the tripod set up at the edge. Are my feet positioned appropriately? Are they angled so that they've got the best grip on the rock? If the rock is too soft, is there a chance they could punch through and destabilize that edge and result in the tripod falling over? My front legs, are they as close to plumb as possible? It's a real waste to have this tripod set up and then have the legs sitting back at 45 degrees with my high point here. The whole point of this is to get my load up and over the edge and manage friction really well. Have I got individually hobbled legs? Have I got the pins on my back leg orientated vertically so that any ropes during the operation that are moving past aren't going to snag on these pins? Everything's looking pretty good, so now I'm going to set up the ropes that I'm going to use for this system. So before we go any further in our setup, we need to make the decision of whether or not our tripod is unquestionably sound. What I mean by that is there any way this could conceivably tip over once we start the operation? At the moment, yes, I could tip it over by pushing the tripod sideways, or if a litter attendant comes up and tries to hold the tripod and lean out sideways. So at the moment, it is certainly questionable. If there is any doubt about the stability of the tripod, then we should only put one rope high and we'll have the other rope low, running over a more traditional piece of edge protection. So that way, regardless of what happens to the tripod, we've still got a tight line between our anchor and the load that we're bringing up or lowering down. How could I make the tripod unquestionably sound? Well, the easiest way would be to get some more cord, operational cord like power cord or 11mm rope, and then simply guy the head of the tripod laterally as well. So we would guy to both sides, then there is no conceivable way we could tip the tripod over. So now let's proceed to set up our lowering system from the back of the tripod. So one of the things I'm keen to see done much better is how the load is managed to the edge and then over the edge through the frame. Both ropes should be kept on belay as the load gets to a point at the edge. Then once at the edge, call for slack just in one of the ropes and just enough to get that up through the high directional. At that point there, we can then even take weight, do a test lift if you like, on the high directional to make sure that everything is sitting in the right place. This is also where we're going to check to see where the resultant is that's being applied to the tripod once it's supporting the load. In this case, it's bisecting the pulley and it is pointing to about that point there on the ground. Now we'll proceed to lower the load over the edge. So now we're partway through the lowering operation. We've got the load over the edge. Most of the change in direction is being taken through this pulley on the high directional, and the resultant is still in the footprint of the tripod. The other rope of our dual main system is running over these edge rollers, which are also protecting the rope through the tripod while they're passing over the edge. So during the lowering, we're using a dual main system here, which means one operator operating both devices. I've got my right hand on the two control levers and I've got my left hand on the two ropes. Now I also should have a second person tailing those ropes just to make sure I can't hold these in the sweet spot, but I should just be able to manage both of these and they should equalize the tension as I do this controlled lower of both ropes. The devices are slightly out of alignment because I've got one rope high and one rope low, but it's still pretty straightforward to operate the two devices in this fashion. If I want to walk away, I'll pull these back to this position here, and then I'll pull a slip overhand in each of these strands, so then we can't inadvertently have something come unlocked. And I'll also just clip these back into one of the carabiners on this system. That one there looks good. Now I can walk away from this system and tend to another part of it if I need to. So we've finished our lower and now we want to do the raise. So with these devices, the CMC clutches, all I need to add to the system are two sets of these little roll clip and T-blocks. So I'll put that on the green rope, and I've got that through there, and then I'm going to put a second one on the black rope and the black rope in. Now I want to reset these devices as far forwards as I can, so making sure that there's no tail tension. There we go. And then when it comes to doing the haul, I want to treat the two ropes as one rope. So I'm going to stand back at or behind my anchor with my haul team, and then I'm going to start pulling on both ropes. It would be more efficient if I unlocked these handles. That still works with them in the lock position, but now free running, I've got my two 3-to-1 systems, which is still just a 3-to-1 system of mechanical advantage to get my load back up. And we get to this point, and that's when we're going to have to do a reset.